how cruel are people willing to be to one another? Actually, maybe a better question would be, how cruel are people willing to be to others they don't like? Now, that's not a rhetorical question. These are things we all need to ask ourselves seriously. And given recent events, it's something we need to be able to answer. Because trust me, those answers matter. Not just for yourself, but for everyone around you, especially those who don't happen to share your views. I hope all of you keep that in mind because it'll help make sense of the story I'm about to tell. And the fact I'm able to share this story and you're able to listen to it right now, that does give me some hope that it's not too late. Now, that could change very soon, but damn it, I'd rather not think about things getting worse than they already are. How it got to this point and how it ultimately affected me, well, to tell that part of the story, I'll need to share a few things about myself. And that alone is a bit of a challenge because I'm not really all that remarkable. I grew up in a typical lower middle class family. I am the oldest of 3 kids, and the town I grew up in was as typical as it was dull. Just picture your average American suburb, and that's exactly what it looked like. It wasn't ideal. It had plenty of issues like crime, corruption, bar fights, and vandalism, but nothing so extreme that it would stand out. And maybe that's why my town was targeted first. Maybe it was always meant to be a proving ground of sorts, a final test before the end game. Maybe, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I hope I've gotten my point across about where I came from. As for me personally, well, I won't say I'm typical, but I was never one to pay much attention to news or politics. In fact, I actively avoided it. It was just something I didn't want to get caught up in any way, shape, or form. I've actually only voted in one election, and it was the first election I was eligible to vote in when I turned 18. I won't say who I voted for. I'll just say they weren't exactly radical reformers. And after going through the trouble of registering and standing in line for over an hour on a cold November day, I can't say I really cared for it. And I didn't vote again afterwards. And that's despite everyone telling me that it's so important that our votes will determine the course of American history. I used to roll my eyes at those remarks, but even now, I would love to hear what those same people think. Because I suspect they'd have mixed feelings, given what's about to happen. Beyond my distaste for voting, I actively avoided political news. That's not to say I ignored all news, but if it didn't involve video games, music, and the movies I wanted to see, I just tuned it out. I even developed a bit of a reputation. My friends in college used to joke that if they ever wanted me to leave a party, they should just start talking politics. I even laughed at that remark. But honestly, it hits really differently now. Sure, I'm aware that people get really passionate about certain issues. I'm also aware that people can disagree severely on certain things, and sometimes it even gets violent. I've seen it happen in real life and online. But I never, ever thought it would lead to something like this. I honestly didn't even know that this had been brewing for a while now. I knew it was an election year. I knew the people running for president this year were colorful, to say the least. And despite my best efforts to ignore them, I still saw the signs, the ads, and the rallies. But I never really listened to what these people were saying or what their supporters were saying. Sure, I heard it, but I did not listen. And trust me, there's a big difference. Eventually, election day comes around, but I stay home, just enjoying an extra day off work. At the time, I'd been living in a shared house with a bunch of college friends, including 2 girls I went to school with and a guy I'd been friends with since the 3rd grade. None of us were all that tuned into politics or elections. Hell, we spent most of election day just sleeping in, playing video games, and having a horror movie marathon. Most of the stuff we didn't get around to watching before Halloween. Nobody at any point that day mentioned the election, and we all went to bed that night not really caring about it. Then I woke up the next morning and things definitely felt different. Before I was even fully awake, I checked my phone to see a long string of strange text messages from friends and family. They varied from panicked emojis to all caps messages. Some were in a panic, some were elated. I didn't know what to make of it at first, but when I checked a random news feed, I saw that it had to do with the newly elected president. Apparently, this super conservative blowhard won, and by a very small margin. Now, I didn't pass high school civics, so I don't claim to know the difference between the popular vote and the electoral vote. I didn't even see it as a big deal at first, but my mother, my younger sister, and all my female friends, they all sounded very worried. Me being so averse to politics, I didn't get involved in too many conversations. I just wanted to get dressed, go to work, and get by as best I could. But there was only so much I could ignore. My 2 female roommates, 2 girls who had always been so tough but level-headed, they looked genuinely scared. They kept pacing throughout the house, constantly talking to friends and family over the phone. I didn't hear what they talked about, but I did hear them mention things like their healthcare, birth control, and their job prospects. And when I arrived for my shift at the auto shop I'd been working at, I saw something similar. The girls and 2 gay guys I'd been working with were really tense and anxious. I tried to offer my support, but since I didn't know what was going on, I'm pretty sure I made things worse. They even got mad at me at one point, claiming I didn't understand what was happening or could happen. And honestly, they were right. I've never been one to needlessly dread, so how could I hope to understand? I should have asked more questions. I should have at least made the effort, but I just retreated back into my own little world, the one where I tuned out politics, news, and whatnot. I tried to focus on my work. I tried to focus on the upcoming holiday season. I may have tried too hard, because I remember getting drunk and smoking a lot more pot than usual in the days that followed. Yeah, that did distract me, but only to a point. Over the next couple of weeks, a few other ominous signs emerged. Those 2 gay co-workers I mentioned earlier, the 2 nicest guys I'd ever hung out with, they just up and disappeared. One day, neither of them showed up for work, claiming they weren't feeling well, and that's the last we ever heard from them. I do remember my boss being on the phone with someone, yelling and cussing up a storm. He kept mentioning their names, but every response he got just enraged him even more. I really should have asked for more info, but it was already too late. And that ended up actually being a running theme. Relatives I usually spoke with regularly, they stopped responding to my texts. A few others that I usually went Christmas shopping with, they left town completely, saying they had to take care of personal or family matters. It was strange, but I still didn't probe deeper. My only recourse was to drink more beer and smoke more pot. It got to a point where I would only be sober for half of the day at the most. I also noticed my roommates ended up joining me more and more. They may not have been as blissfully ignorant as me, but they seemed eager to escape the real world, more so than usual. Finally, it all went to hell the weekend before Thanksgiving. It was a cold, stormy night, wind howling outside where rain and snow fell. My roommates and I were all home, having run out of alcohol and weed. We really weren't doing much. The girls were in their rooms doing, I honestly don't remember. My roommate was lounging on the couch watching a movie, and I was working on some music project on my computer, hoping the weather would clear up before I had to drive home for the holidays. But then, the power flickered, which wasn't unusual during a storm like this. But shortly afterwards, this strange alarm started blaring. It came from the TV, my phone, my computer, and even my roommate's tablet. I've never heard anything like it before. I thought it was some kind of emergency siren. The screens all turned to this weird red screen with colored text, and that's when we all heard the same strange message. Attention! This is the emergency broadcast system. A state of emergency has been declared in your locality. Please remain in your homes. This is not a drill. That message repeated itself several times. It woke the girls up. They came downstairs holding their phones, wondering what was going on. We all thought it had something to do with the storm, and we talked about going down to the basement or covering the windows. Instead, we just decided to gather our food, store some water, and wait for things to pass. But as we were making these preparations, we heard the sound of these big trucks driving by outside. At first, I thought they were snowplows or dump trucks. But then I heard a bunch of yelling and shouting outside. It started off distant, but it got closer and closer. The girls started to really get scared. And my roommate and I decided to check the front door. I was just a few feet behind him, and that might have ended up saving my life. Because just as he was about to look through the window, they came bursting in. Who exactly were they? Well, that's a tricky question to answer. Initially, I thought it was a SWAT team or something. They sure as hell barged in like they were, knocking the door off the hinges, breaking through windows, and storming into the house as though we were drug lords or something. It was so loud and chaotic. My roommate, he ended up getting hit hard by the door as it flew open. And he got popped in the head by one of the figures, knocking him out cold in the process. I don't even know if he survived. And while I just stumbled back, my other two roommates started screaming. They tried to hide in the pantry, but they never got the chance. These people, and I use that term loosely, were in full combat gear and armed with assault rifles, their faces covered by some strange gray masks. But these were not cops. They were not SWAT teams, FBI, or law enforcement of any kind. My uncle's a cop, so I know the difference. These people, they were something else. And that only became more clear once they subdued me and my roommates. Things get a little blurry here, but I can say there was a lot of yelling, a lot of cussing, and the howling wind outside was not helping. I sure did my share of yelling, saying that they got the wrong house and there was nothing here. I mean, we didn't even have any weed left, and I may or may not have said something about my dad being a lawyer, which was a lie, by the way. But even if it wasn't, I doubt that would have changed anything. Because when one of the men pinned me down in the corner of the dining room, pointing the end of his rifle at my chest, he knelt down and removed his mask. And while he didn't look that remarkable, the way he glared at me still shakes me to my soul.
We're in the right place. We've got the right people.
I tried to protest, but there's only so much you can do when the barrel of a gun is pointed at you. My female roommates were much louder. I didn't see what was happening to them. I just remembered their voices being muffled at one point. And I dread to think what those men did to silence them. While I'm looking up at this man in front of me, others like him are scouring our home. They start taking whatever they can. Our laptops, our phone, our files, even our trash. I couldn't tell if they were looking for something or if they were just taking shit for the sake of it. But eventually, the man in front of me becomes my only focus. And once he starts talking, my world of blissful ignorance starts crumbling.
According to public records, you did not vote in this past election. Your roommates did, but they cast ballots for the opposing party. The party we know to be actively destroying America. The party that stands with traitors. Our glorious president-elect has henceforth declared war on them and their allies. This is our preemptive strike.
It sounded insane. I didn't know what the hell this guy was talking about. I knew the state of politics in America was bad, but this was a whole new level of messed up. I thought it was a joke. I wish it was a joke. But the glare this man gave me, the look in his eyes, it was so full of venom and hate. I didn't even know these people, and somehow I'm being treated like a sworn enemy?
You may not have voted, but we've seen your public profile. You are not a patriot. You've made numerous jokes on social media about our most cherished traditions. Both your parents are also of mixed race, and the vast majority of them have never voted on the sides of patriots. And if you are not with us, the true patriots, then you are traitors to this country and will be treated as such.
At that point, I genuinely feared for my life. The way this guy had the gun pointed at me, I could tell he wanted to pull the trigger. In the moment, I thought he was just hesitating, like any normal person would. But I quickly realized that this guy was not normal. Nothing about this was normal.
We've tolerated this for too long. People like you. You claim to be Americans, but you constantly berate and denigrate our great country. You refuse to abide by our traditions. You refuse to respect our heritage. We've allowed you to exist for years, but that was a mistake. Only true patriots deserve this country. Only true patriots appreciate real freedom.
While he was going on this diatribe, I heard my female roommates cry out. They sounded both hurt and horrified. I saw several more men run to where they were. I then watched helplessly as they dragged them out the front door, their mouths gagged and their wrists bound with these plastic zip ties. They were crying and thrashing about. At one point, they looked towards me. I've never seen such fear and dread in anyone's eyes before. It's like they knew what they were in for, and me, all I could do was watch.
Do not worry about them. Those women were corrupted by the perverse teachings of the schools they went to. They're going to join every other corrupted woman in this town at a detention center. Lucky for them, they're young and healthy. If they were true patriots, they'd be married by now and expecting their second child. But don't worry, we'll fix that soon enough. We have eager, patriotic men to take care of them. If all goes well, they'll be impregnated by the end of tonight.
When I heard that, much of my fear turned to anger. I knew these girls. They were good, decent girls who'd done nothing wrong. They never fooled around in college more than any other woman. I knew they weren't married and they weren't virgins, but they weren't monsters. And now, this guy was telling me they were about to become someone's sex slave? I wanted to go after them. I wanted to get them away from these monsters. The men must have sensed that because he hit me in the head with the butt of his gun. And while I'm on the floor, in pain and very woozy, he just keeps talking.
Take a good look. They are the lucky ones. Young, fertile women will have it easy in a true patriot's America. They'll get to do what all patriot women ought to do. Make babies that grow up to become loyal, dedicated Americans, the kind who will work hard, uphold our traditions, and never dare undermine our great country. But you, I wish I could kill you right now. You've probably had premarital sex. You've probably done drugs. You've probably blasphemed against our great nation. That is not American.
He hits me again for good measure. I manage to avoid the worst of it, but I stay on the floor. I close my eyes, hoping to wake up from this nightmare. But it's no use. This is really happening in America. And it just keeps getting worse.
You and your male roommate. Death is too easy for you. Our glorious new president has said as such. He has already decided your fate. You two will be taken to a Patriot Re-Education Center. There, you will learn to love America. You will learn to love freedom. But you'll have to work for it. You'll have to suffer for it. And my fellow patriots and I will make sure it's very, very painful. Because watching you and traitors like you suffer, that is our right as free Americans.
The cruelty of his words, the sadism in his voice. I had a hard time processing it at that moment. But looking at him, seeing what he just did to my friends, it became all too real. This is really happening here in the United States of America. My female roommates are being hauled off, branded as traitors and doomed to a life of sex slavery. And I'm about to be sent to some sort of prisoner internment camp where I'll be made to suffer, all for the high crime of not being a patriot in this asshole's eyes. In that same moment, I had a painful realization. That cruelty, that hate, that desire to make their sworn enemies suffer, there was an agenda at work here. But it wasn't big, elaborate, or ambitious. It was disturbingly simple. I'd love to put it into words. I'd also love to describe how I managed to escape and how I managed to craft this message, hoping others throughout the country will be able to prepare themselves. But there isn't any time. I need to leave America, my home country, as fast as I can. But before I go, I'll just relay the last words I heard the man say. The words that perfectly encapsulate their plan now that they've won the last election.
This was always the end game. We never hit it. There was no conspiracy. We've never even needed one. It actually feels good to finally put our words into action, turning our true vision for this country into something real. To hurt them, punish them, and utterly destroy them in the worst way imaginable. That was always the point. And now, having won the last election, no one can stop us.